My date of birth is October the 25th, 1918. My parents was Louise and Jim Brunetti. I had five sisters and one brother, and their names was Isidore and which was called Buck Brunetti, and I have Rose Franco. I have Ida Zuppo. I have Inez Zuppo, and I have Claire Penalto, and I have Mary Taldo. My dad worked for several years in the coal mines in around Wilburton, Oklahoma, and later on, we had a little farm, and he came home to do the farming. We lived 2 miles north of Tontitown, and which is in the Elm Springs district, you know. My mother's name was Louise. Original name was Taldo, and she was a great lady, and I had the misfortune of losing my mom when I was 12 years old, and she died of a severe heart attack. He was in the farming business, my dad was, and he stuck with the farming area. Well, we had some milk cows, and then we had a team of horses, and he was the ramrod of the farming around home. I milked cows, and I also farmed, and I'll tell you one thing about farming area. My dad was teaching me how to plant tomatoes, which they used to use a wood stick or a steel flat iron to plant tomatoes. And I happened to appear to him that I wasn't listening when he was telling me, and I remember getting one whack on my leg from him. We worked for other farmers around there, some of them that had bigger farms, and we helped them do their farming in addition to our farming. My brother and I helped one of the farmers there do a lot of their planting tomatoes and strawberries and picking strawberries, and we had odds and ends of jobs that we did to make a little money for ourselves. Oh yes, we had 2 vineyards in our farm, and they wasn't large vineyards, but they helped substantiate the economy. Oh, there were several farmers around there that raised. One of my brother-in-laws had a pretty big vineyard, and we had cousins that had vineyards, and friends that there were several vineyards around Tontitown at one time. Well, being my brother and I was the youngest of the family, why we didn't help too much around, but when there was needing jobs done, like going in the timbers and cutting wood, we'd do that, and help cultivate the farms, and we used to set out strawberries, which we of course had to pick and send them to the market. The first thing I can remember about Tontitown was when I was about 5 years old, I guess. Um, and I remember going, my dad used to take my mom and I for a buggy ride, one horse buggy, and around visiting the outer parts of the town and going to speak to different people and our friends. Well, the only place that we were going to was like farmers like ourselves, and we go to their farm and see what they had planted and look at their vineyards and so on and so forth. So we had close friends there. There was John Franco and his brother Dick, and he had another brother Joe, and they all were farmers. They all each had a farm, and going to my future brother-in-law's place and visiting their farm, and they had vineyards and strawberries, plenty of strawberries and the like, and corn and harvest hay and the like. My wife was Betty June Murdoch, and she lived in Coweta, Oklahoma. And how I met my wife is she was at her brother-in-law's restaurant in Muskogee, Oklahoma, helping him out, and I went in there to eat supper one evening, and she came to me. She said, "My brother-in-law's out, and I don't think I know how to do some cooking." I says, "Oh, you sure do." I says, "I'll help you with it," and so she did. I said, "I want some ham and eggs," and she did a good job of it. Yeah, they had this feller had in Tontitown had a general store that we used to purchase merchandise from, and we'd visit there quite a bit. And when we needed a short line of groceries, well, that's where we'd go, and we did most of our shopping in Springdale, Arkansas, which is 5 miles from where we was at. And the name of the store in Tontitown was Tontitown Mercantile. Well, the first guy that I can remember was E.P. Penalto, and he ran that store for some time by himself, and then his nephew bought into the store, and he took him in, and they both ran the store there for a certain length of time. Then he decided he would go to California and put in a store there in Ontario, California, and which he did, and was a success of it. And I visited him out there at that store, and he was really a fine gentleman. No, I was born, and I think we lived shortly there, and my dad bought a house down there, and I lived there for several years until I decided I would go to California and try my luck out there and see what they had going on, and which I did, and I lived there 4 years, and then decided to come back home and lived there for some time. I was almost 18 years old when I moved away from Tontitown. I was drafted in the service in June of 1942, and I recall of riding a bus to Fort Smith, and then to Camp Robinson in Little Rock, Arkansas, and stayed there shortly, changed clothes, and then I was shipped to Ontario, California, and we was reactivating the 81st Wildcat Division there, and I was first put into the driver's section, and found out that they needed me in the radio section, the communications outfit, which was called the Division Artillery communication section, and I was operated the international mode course in that Division Artillery battery. It was 317 Field Artillery Battalion, and wound up going to war in Japan, and we was in combat there in two different battles, and from there, when the war was declared ended, why I was transferred. I was shipped back home and discharged. I went to the Tontitown grade school there, and started out in what they called a primer at that time, primer grade, and I went up through the 8th grade, and decided that I was smarter than they were, I think, and quit school, and then shortly afterwards I went to California, and well, I had some good teachers there. One of them was named Sister DeShalmel, which lots of people didn't like her, but I took advantage of that, and I wanted to learn something, and that's what I did. Oh, one of my classmates was Francis Finn. They lived in the Elm Spring area, but they were going to school at Tontitown, and I had a first cousin, Virgil Sabatini, that we was really pals, and Lawrence Pinalto was another good pal of mine, and several other the boys there that we played baseball with a lot. The days of school was, it's hard to put into words, but I remember reading, writing, and arithmetic was the main thing that we learned, and of course then we got into higher grades, we learned a lot of history and geography. No, they did not teach Italian there. To begin with, in the school, we didn't have electricity, but later on we did, and it was a blessing too, because it sure was needed there. We went to church there in Tontitown. They had a Catholic church there, and we went to church there. And of course, the teachers always took us to church in the morning, and sometimes in the evenings. So I learned my Catholic religion there. Well, the one I can recall was Father Furist. For fun, well, we got together at different people's homes and played baseball a lot. and other games involved, which hide and seek, and but baseball was our main game. The older boys played baseball, say from about the best I remember, about the fourth or fifth grade on up, and that's who mainly played baseball. Bocce? Oh, yeah, well, that was for the adults. The younger boys, when they first started playing bocce there, was the boys out of school. And I know my brother was a real bocce player, and he started out when he was, I guess, about 16, 17, somewhere in there. And they would play bocce. They would play bocce every weekend and sometime during the week. Well, they had a place there. One of the farmers there had a place where they played bocce. They had a bocce court in this town here, and they played there on the weekends and sometimes a lot throughout the week. And of course, my brother was a bocce player, and he's always up there with them boys. And it was just a fun place to go and watch them play. They had a farm there. It was Victor Chola. Victor Chola. As a matter of fact, he was a brother-in-law of my brother. And he was a fun guy. He's a jokeable type of guy, you know, and he'd laugh at just about anything, and but he was just a comedian to speak of, you know, and people liked him very much and had fun with him. We used to get together with the old folks and play cards. The different games that we played, cards, pitch, and different. The game of pitch was the main game that we played, and the old folks played it, and the young folks played it. Oh, that goes way back. When I was a kid, going to the Grape Festival. That was fun for all of us around there, and it was a way of making some money for the parish. The main thing I can remember is of having ice cream stands and hamburger stands, and we used to get people in there that had music and would sing Western songs, which I loved very much. Yes, we all helped, and the main job that I had was staying up nights and looking after the stands and ground, and so nobody will come in and vandalize it and so on. The restaurant in Tontitown, there was at one time there was, and I think there still are, about 3 restaurants. My nephew, of course, operated one of them there, and then later his kids, and which they're still doing, operating one in Tontitown there. And then there's the name of that restaurant is Mama Z's, and of course they serve dinners there. They serve well, they also have the breakfast there now, and they started out just having evening dinners, and they made a success of it, and they're still doing it. One of the other them was Venetian Inn, and the other one was named, we just, this lady opened it up, and her name was Mary Mastery, and that's what the restaurant went by. Well, there's more buildings than there used to be, and there's more businesses now than there used to be. Of course, a lot of people works in Springdale, which offers jobs for quite a few people in Tontitown, because there's not enough jobs there for a lot of the people there, you know. I know some of them are farmers, and they live entirely on the farm, but there's others that has a farm and also work in town at other businesses. The good things about there in a small town is getting together and associating together, like playing cards and at nighttime and so on and so forth, and getting together for dinners. And I was telling them it was a nice town to be from and be in. And I said there's a lot of good people in that town, and people that you would want to associate with and have fun together. And because we used to get together and have dances there in that town. And as a matter of fact, I was in charge of a dance there for 5 years. That we outside people came in and danced there, and hired some good music. And well, in Tontitown in the summertime, we used to have a baseball team made up of all the boys around there, and play outside out of town teams. And that was one of the games that one of the fun things that we did, and go to the baseball and baseball game. The kids played in baseball at the school, but at this we'd have this games in the summertime, and it was mainly adults, all adults in the games, and we'd play other towns, you know, the adult games too. They wasn't youngsters. They was grown up boys, you know. The towns we compete with was Prairie Grove was one of the towns that I can remember, and Elm Springs, I think, was one. They had a team for a while. Yeah, one of the top players was Virgil Barucki, and he was mainly the catcher, I think. And there was some. My brother played on the team all the time, and he was a pretty good hitter. And we had 2 or 3 boys. Fred Chola was a good hitter. We always depended on him to knock home runs, and Virgil Bursey was one of them. Oh, it was for free. It was for free. They had a ball diamond there. We called it ball diamonds. It's a ball field, and it was right in town there. It belonged to one of the merchants there, I think. Well, Nemo Morsani was one, and he helped out in the schools, and I know any time the teacher would have a problem, they'd call on this man here to come down, and he had a deep, rough voice, and he scared the kids when he walked in the door. And he was the main one. And we had one man there that they called him Mr. Millar. He had run a grocery store there, and he always he played the piano for the church and organ, and the piano for the schools, and he was well liked and depended on him a lot. And I had an uncle that would take pictures of different people, and when they needed him, and he lived there in town, real close. It's my mother's brother, and he really was a good guy. And he lived with his brother because he was disabled. Had a gunshot to his leg when he was a young man, and he was a barber there in that town, and he operated a barber shop out of that house that they lived in. He lived with his brother, and he had his barber shop in there. I'd say my famous thing about Tontitown is there are a lot of good people in that town that you can communicate with, and a good bunch of people.